Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to WorkFusion's Virtual Summit. My name is Veronica Andreeva, and I'm a Director of Product Marketing here at WorkFusion, an intelligent automation company. In this session, we're going to focus on scaling automation across an enterprise. If you have already watched our previous session with Craig Leclerc from Forrester, you might recall that scale continues to be a major hurdle for over half of enterprise RPA programs, with only the top 10% achieving significant scale. And the secret sauce for those top performers is at the center of our discussion today. It's my pleasure to welcome two extraordinary guests, Nishal Piratla from Deutsche Bank and Matt Spear from Carta Bank & Trust. Nishal Piratla, PhD, is an R&D leader with 20 plus years of expertise. He's a director at Deutsche Bank Innovation Labs. Nishal led the effort to bring intelligent automation into the bank, resulting in over $10 million of savings. With Nishal's contribution, Deutsche Bank Innovation Labs has been recognized in the top 25 world's best financial innovation labs. Matt Spear is an accomplished technology leader with over 15 years of experience, and he's also a former US Army helicopter pilot. Matt is an executive vice president and a CIO for Carta Bank & Trust. Previously, Matt served as a CIO at Regions Bank and a CTO at M&T Bank. Matt successfully implemented intelligent automation at Carta Bank, and within the first few months was able to automate over 30 use cases and achieved $2.5 million in savings. Matt, Nishal, first of all, thank you for your continued partnership with WorkFusion. And of course, thank you for being generous with your time today. I would like to kick off with the first question. And my first question is about your organizations and how within your organizations you understand what is scale of automation. Is it, like I referred before, the dollar saved, or is it the number of use cases, potentially the penetration into the lines of businesses, or is it a mindset? So why don't we start? Whoever wants to start first.
Oh yeah, thank you for the kind introduction, Veronica. Let me actually start because I think it's a question that really is not a unidirectional answer. It's a multitude of things. Of course, I think you have to start with mindset. That's basically the point of entry. If you have a right leader who's visionary, but at the same time responsible for day-to-day things. So I think an ideal candidate would be a head of global operations, but actually also is a visionary. So once you have that down, you're actually in for automation, intelligent or basic RPA. But after you get in, you have to really look at how you actually start with these things, because most of the time when you do a new transformation, you have to actually show cost savings as quickly as possible. So I think the scaling plan should include a quick show of bugs. And then actually also to have the story right, you have to show how you can cover all the use cases within a business line and also across the business line. Actually, I would bring similarity with the product line thinking, where we say that there should be must requirements, there should be should requirements, and nice to have requirements when we talk about features. In similar way, I think the must should be the cost savings, and should have a feature should be similar to covering more use cases within that division. And nice to have is across the bank. And the size of Deutsche Bank, I think it's not easy to go across the bank right away and try to propose and say, hey, we'll take care of entire automation in Deutsche Bank. It's not an easy task. I think it depends also on the size that you're addressing.
And I couldn't agree with you more in that it really is a mindset, because one, you do have to have that vision of what you're trying to accomplish, and then it's a little different. So Carta Bank & Trust, we're a little bit smaller than Deutsche Bank, and so that ability for us, on scale, is getting across the entire enterprise is relatively easy, and because all of us that are heads of the different lines, work and interact with each other every single day, and so that ability to say, okay, I'm going to spend this week concentrating on loan operations and see what are the opportunities there. And I think that, part of it is you have to educate them on what can be done. Also take the opportunity to kind of really look at the business processes that exist today and re-engineer it wherever possible, because let's face it, a lot of those business processes have been doing that same kind of process for 20 years, because that's the way that I've always done it, and they're inefficient to begin with, and you're not just trying to do labor arbitrage, but be able to turn things faster. At the end of the day, you have to be able to measure it and be able to show that, either you deferred labor into some other value add, or that you had the ability to be able to eliminate that need altogether for that labor resource and what the cost is. And I think that, we had really good success in the beginning and just continued to build on it. And while, Veronica, you said 30, that we're more like 100 use cases today. And I think it still amazes everybody, because our board loves to see the graphs that come out of WorkFusion to say, hey, on any given day of the week, that there are 50 to 60 active WorkFusion tasks going on, and they can visualize it as well. And that really pays off, because a lot of them that they don't understand what this is about. I think conceptually they get it, but there's nothing like having that ability to see what is occurring and then the end result that really helps, I guess, foster that acceleration and a higher level of acceptance.
Awesome. Thank you. So it sounds like both of you agree that it all starts with the mindset. And I wonder, so my next question, I guess somewhat related to that, given the current situation, the topic number one on top of mind for everybody, the pandemic. We all know the social implications of this, but did it affect the mindset and also your automation priorities? And does your existing automation program help serve your customers better during these difficult times?
And I'll start, and that I would say that certainly I think that the pandemic gave us new opportunities to be able to find tasks to automate. And I'll just use the current one, of course, is the Paycheck Protection Program. And one, getting those applications in and then getting submitted into E-Tran, get their approval process is part of it. But then, of course, you got to do all the booking of those loans on the back end, not to mention all the account openings, because some banks took it, they were only servicing current customers. We open it up to our communities, to anyone that, whether they were a customer or not. However, they did have to open up an account. And while you can open a business account online, it's not the same as doing a consumer account. There's a lot of steps that have to occur in that process. And so we were able to automate a lot of that new account setup on the back end that would have just absolutely swamped our back office. And so there were opportunities to shine and make it really, it's the man behind the curtain, except it's WorkFusion, and to get those kind of things done faster in response to events that were occurring.
I guess we have a slightly changed thing with the pandemic going on, and things actually being quite difficult with the global operations, because now you are trying to align the people who are working from different parts of the world in a big bang to basically adjust to the new environment, working from homes and all that. Of course, it actually upsizes the significance of intelligent automation in these times. But I think the application of it will slow down a bit, because there is a lot more time spent on other things to get daily engine running. But I think as we go along, we'll see more and more interest and also more and more application of automation within the bank because of these times.
Thank you. There's also, an opinion that with the pandemic, everything accelerating, all of the projects are accelerating. Do you think accelerating the scale of automation is possible, or does the scaling process have to take a long time? And what do you think of the role of pre-built use cases in the picture of scaling? How does it affect scaling?
I would actually say that the scaling actually will help, but I think there is a more involvement required in terms of how we engage with the leaders now, because now it's a little bit harder to get their time. But at the same time, they are looking for ways to run this engine as smooth as it can. So scaling will certainly improve, but it's not going to accelerate during this time, but will, I think, certainly accelerate right after this to a level we might have not imagined before this.
Yeah, and I would agree with you, Michelle, that the demand for being able to respond even faster has been there during the course of this crisis, and I think that's going to continue for a period of time afterwards. And that's why kind of pre-built use cases, knowing that every organization is going to operate a little differently. But if you take something like I need to do a new account review process. Well, there's some basic, doesn't matter if it's Deutsche, Citigroup, JPMC, Carter Bank and Trust, that have to happen. And it's just, okay, they have to happen with little differences between the organizations. And so what that does was with pre-built use cases allow you to be able to move faster, to be able to implement faster, because let's face it, we're all good at this video conferencing thing at this point. However, it's still not nearly as efficient to be able to put a bunch of people in a room to talk through something and make decisions and get it done. And so things take longer. And so there's an advantage to those pre-built use cases.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I think whiteboarding has been a major part of our discussions with even WorkFusion. I think without whiteboard, at least as an innovator personally, I feel there is a lot that cannot be discussed on chalkboard, on video conferences. That actually slows us down a bit in terms of creative approach to these problems. But certainly, I think the sizing up is going on internally, so that we'll actually attack it with more fiercely, to say, right after this, when things go back to normal.
Okay, sounds good. And I want to get back to one of the parts of this question. So do you think that scaling has to take a long time? Because what the data shows is that most of the time it takes a long time for banks in other enterprises to scale their automation efforts. Does it have to be this way?
Oh, I would say no, it doesn't. And because, again, scale is kind of a ambiguous term, but to me, what it means is both width and depth. And so I really think that an organization can be as aggressive as they want to in, scaling out. It just takes a level of coordination, because everybody attacks it in terms differently. In that, within my area, I've got basically a center of excellence around this, and they really drive identifying use cases, but they can't do that without the partnership from the line of business. At the end of the day, if I'm a line of business head and I know that, my current cost run rate is X, and this can help me get it to X minus something, and it's great for the enterprise as a whole, well, I'm going to pursue that aggressively. And so it's also dependent upon the other part of the partnership as to how quickly they want to move, because you can move pretty quickly, and it doesn't need to take a long time.
I think with the size of Deutsche Bank, I would say this actually is a difficult problem. That's why we have innovation labs, so that we can provide the coverage of the width for the companies like WorkFusion. Otherwise, I think you'll be taking one leader in one business line, which is huge, probably a size of another small bank, and going deeper in that. So we realize that with the innovation labs, we can actually bring in the width by understanding what the offering is in the market, and also be the front runner on in terms of due diligence and other things that we need to do on this particular vendor, and then actually take it forward, and it's easier to go widthwise. But again, as I said, the scaling will be slow, because I think if you define scaling as going across the bank for a big bank, if you have not proven by covering more and more depth within a business line, then you're trying to, I think, go wider and really not achieve anything. So we actually try to keep it focused on one business line until we feel that this business line is covered, let's say 50% or good coverage, then actually go with the other things. But that doesn't stop us from informing the other parts of business line in the way about the vendor, because it's important to get it initiated. But yeah, it does take time. It's not as easy as in smaller places, I suppose.
Great, thank you. And to your point about collaborating with business lines, so I know that at both the Deutsche Bank and Carta Bank, you pretty much scales the intelligent automation efforts across different business lines. But at the same time, another similarity is one of those processes, one of those groups of use cases is in anti-money laundering. And I was wondering, why AML? And do you think that AML is a necessary or required step for scaling your automation for a financial services business?
I would actually say that there are some important things within a corporate and investment bank that actually have to be taken care of. And I think if you as a vendor or anybody doing intelligent automation wants to make sure that you are actually taking care of bread and butter things and proving yourselves, that would be actually AML, the area which is quite important. There are regulators who are actually making sure, working with us all the time. At the same time, it's on top of our thought process. It's a moving target. You do it, and again, the new additions, client is not going to wait for things to happen and then start doing the taxes for the next year or buying anything more. I think you have to be on constant run on these things. And proving here is very important. If you prove here, I think you can actually prove in other places much easier, because you don't have such a rigorous demand as AML in let's say in other use cases.
And I would add on to that, one, is it necessary? No. Is it a really good idea? Yes. And just because of the fact of, one, there's volume there. And, as well as, there's very defined things that must occur within, anti-money laundering and as, know your customer processes to be able to achieve it. And so, one of the problems when you're doing it manually is to be able to keep that audit trail of what you have done. But when you automate it, the creation of the documentation around the process is built in. And so you can, as an example, I'll use that negative news search as an example. So, the way it has been done in the past is you've got a list of your high-risk customers, and somebody goes and does Google searches on it, and then takes screenshots and saves them off to a file folder, versus give me, the 5,000 customers that I want to do a negative news search on, put it in on Friday evening, and then on Monday morning, all the results are waiting there for the analyst to go and review, as well as the entire audit trail around it. And that's something that would take a small team a week or so to be able to do it. Basically, the automation tool is doing it when everyone else is hopefully out having a nice weekend.
Well, I think Matt, we should exchange our roles. Sounds easy when you talk about what's happening at Carta Bank. I think in our case, if I take the same use case, I think negative news. We are working with WorkFusion now on actually removing the false positives on negative news. Let's say if you end up with all these news articles, and of course, given the size of the bank and how many clients we have, you are going through these news articles where you may have 80% or 90% of false positives. Your analyst is spending a lot of time on these things. I think for us, it's quite crucial in this search. I think we have sources that provide us with the news articles. Of course, we also do open searches, but these elements, some of them actually are very crucial when you try to remove your false positives. Even half of them, you are actually ramping up by weeks in finishing these KYC things. So I think the size probably is one of the things that makes it quite different between Matt and me in these use cases. But definitely the approach is the same in terms of process.
Great, thank you. And I have just one last question for you. So given that everything that's going on with automation right now, how do you see automation unfold for the financial service institutions? And what organizational changes do you think need to happen for banks of various sizes in order to be successful with intelligent automation?
I think in terms of automation itself, I would actually break into the basic as is automation, which I think many banks are doing right now. That is, just put a basic RPA and try to remove the human in the loop and try to log into the different systems and get the process executed. But that's actually not going to be a long-term solution for these things. Many of these processes have to be streamlined. However, any AI-based intelligent automation will still exist because, like I said, you have the problems of moving targets, and you still have the challenges of actually regulatory requirements that differ from geography to geography, and also the document requirements that differ. And we are not still in the electronic age where everything is not paper. We still have a lot of electronic documents, to be precise, but we still have documents. So I think the automation, which is based on NLP, which is based on other AI technologies, is crucial. It will be a long-term focus on intelligent automation is more important than basic RPA, which I think is more of a flaw in the process that you want to fix for now, but change the process going forward.
Yeah, Michelle, I couldn't agree with you more. The basic RPA is, I don't want to oversimplify it, but it is relatively straightforward. But because of all those different types of documents and the interaction with the data that might exist in them, that combination of OCR, but more importantly over time, machine learning capabilities, so that one, to your example on negative news search and how to drive down the false positives where somebody actually does have to review it. And so I think that, more advantage of taking advantage of machine learning. An example, especially in the world of retail banking, one of the hardest things to ever try to determine is how do you have some kind of trigger event around when it looks like a customer is leaving, because the cost of getting a new customer is much more than keeping a current one. And so how can you leverage that machine learning so that you have automation around being able to review transactional data around accounts every single day, look at trends, and then be able to kick out tasks to the humans that ultimately will be then turn around and reach out to that customer, find out what's going on, see what you can do to possibly keep them within your bank. And there's a lot of advantage to those kind of things. So I think it'll continue to be where, the base level of RPA, it's there. And I think everybody that has been using that proves it out that it works well. But that combination and to be able to extract data from multiple different types of sources, whether it's a scanned PDF of a document, an email, and then leverage machine learning capabilities around it to make it smarter in the way that it then goes about conducting tasks, because it's going to be huge for the financial services industry.
Awesome to hear. Thank you so much for your insights. That was the last question, and this wraps up this session. And I would like to thank our audience for joining. And if you didn't listen to any other sessions, please do so. They're available now. They will be available on demand. And once again, I would like to thank our amazing panel, Michelle, Matt. It was a pleasure to talk to you today, and have the rest of your day, and take care.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.